The one thing that you can't teach AI right now as a writer is curiosity. And so always good writing is rooted in curiosity.
Welcome, everyone, to the TechGuide podcast, where we give actionable advice to those wanting to break into tech or are looking for their next gig. We have Nettie Reynolds on the podcast today to talk about pivoting careers, the benefits of having a diversified career, content, and her cute pug. Super excited to have you on today, Nettie. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
And you are a fellow Austinite as well. I always love connecting with you, with other Austinites as well. So yeah, like I said, super excited to have you on.
Yep.
And so, yeah, you're now a senior marketing manager at Community Brands.
Right.
But that's not how this initially started. You initially started out covering Silicon Valley as a journalist.
That's
right.
right.
To those early Silicon Valley days being a journalist, where did the love, the want to be a journalist come from?
Well, I've always been a writer. And so that's been, I'm a published playwright, and at night I write plays. And so I've just always been really driven by writing. And I had a great opportunity to write at the start of the internet. So truly, very early on, I got hired by this company that isn't here anymore. It was called the Internet Business Forum. And so I got to interview people that were creating the things that we all use now that are ubiquitous. And the reason I got to do that is because I had a job at KXCN, NBC affiliate station in Austin. And I had my first child. Their name is Bug. And when I had them, I decided to stay home, but I still wanted to write. And so I had someone who I'd written for before with magazines and movie kits. And they said, we're going to start this little forum to help people learn about the internet. So I just had a great time doing that. And then I gradually kept writing more of those. And then I had a guy from NetSuite, Zach Nelson, hired me to do a lot of case studies. And so I just kept writing. I just kept writing on the web. And the more I would write, kind of the more jobs I would get. One of the things that I can say is that I've been on LinkedIn for so long. And I would tell anyone who's young, take it seriously. LinkedIn is your boardroom. Facebook is your playground. Use LinkedIn to better yourself in your career, because every job I've gotten, except for when I was a chaplain, came through LinkedIn.
That is super interesting. Now, I want to ask about writing early on the internet. Was it kind of a weird thing to see
it was
come to life and then also start writing on the internet?
It was really amazing. I started writing on the internet. I think that was in 2000, and it was just incredible. When my kids used to tease me, that I didn't know all these social media tools, I was like, well, Barack Obama didn't follow your Twitter account, even though it's X now, and I don't have an account on X anymore. But, it was really great. I remember interviewing people like, Tony Heiss from Zappos and John Nordmark, who started eBags, and all of these startups and all of these funders. And I would go and talk at these venture capitalist conferences all over the country. And now, again, all those things are just radically accepted. I was also really lucky because early on, I started, my PR agency. They call it, I went to the dark side of PR and marketing, but I had kids in school, so I had to do that. I used to be called the mom in pajamas who writes late at night, because when I first started writing about the web, I would write in the night while my kids were sleeping. And so I started interviewing. I covered cybersecurity way back in the day. I could only get people that were in Europe because it was their daytime. So I started interviewing people during their daytime. And, I kept advancing because people were like, how are you getting a hold of the guys at Starbucks or whatever it may be that was, and it was only because I had to write at night while my kids were sleeping. So some of it was really luck. And then other parts of it was if you could get those clips, then you could get more work. And so that's really important. And I would say to writers, even young writers today, sometimes you have to write for a small amount, just to get those clips added to your, to your LinkedIn profile, or just to get them added to I use Journo Portfolio, which is really great.
Yeah.
It can pull in all your clips that you do. So it kind of starts a base record of everything you've ever written. But those clips are important. So a lot of times I didn't get paid very much, but I wrote to those clips, and that helped me get higher and higher writing positions.
Can you talk to me a little bit more about writing now versus writing then, and how someone can actually like stand out? I'd be curious on your thoughts on how you stood out back in like the early 2000s versus like now, how someone can stand out with their writing.
Well, I think it's changed quite a bit. I would tell you, and this is all your viewers are probably going to just go, oh, old goat here. But I love that AI has started. Okay. But the one thing that you can't teach AI right now as a writer is curiosity. And so always good writing is rooted in curiosity. I got a degree from Goddard College in English. I didn't get a degree in technology. So I had to really learn all of these things very quickly before I would interview someone. And I just kept learning. And so in your writing, even today, the best writing has a human-centric focus. The best writing is telling us, we have this problem in common, and here's how you're going to fix it. Or here's this new drug that's going to change the lives of people with chronic heart failure, or whatever it may be. And those are things that are intentional and intuitive. And so even in copywriting, the ones that really get you are the ones that have that human connection. And AI is not human connected in terms of its curiosity. So just like you said at the start of our interview, I'm going to ask you some questions, and then we'll kind of just have a conversation. You can't have a conversation with AI, and that goes to the writing that you're doing. You're always having a conversation with whoever you're writing to and whoever you're writing about. So that hasn't changed. And I think that the great thing that AI does for writers is, I hate doing outlines for white papers or things like that. And so it's very helpful in speeding that process up. It's very helpful for ideation. If you have different ideas, it can suggest some really great things to you. So I'm a proponent of using it, but not using it in exclusion to your own craft, because I think as writers, our commitment, even as content writers or whatever the next type's name will be, because it'll be something different in 5 years. We're already seeing like AI prompt content engineers. It doesn't matter the names that they change it to. What matters is, are you going to stay focused on improving your craft? Because for me, being a writer is part of my life. And so I see everything through a writer's lens. And that's not going to change.
Yeah. And I agree with that as well. I feel like in the day and age where like you can just simply have AI write something for you, there's something special about like a human writes it, and you can actually feel that authenticity when it comes to like human writing. When you see like a ChatGPT article, I'm sure you definitely can notice it. Like you notice it when it's written in ChatGPT. Yeah. In a way, kind of cheapens the product.
You can exactly. I mean, I think one of the tricks and that I use that I know immediately it's just a total ChatGPT article is because if you read it out loud, there's no human cadence to it.
Yeah.
And there's no asides, and there's no, and maybe they'll be able to teach it all that, because I think AI is going to do great things in terms of, medical technology and all of these things that we're not talking about. But again, I would say as an artist, as a writer, as a painter, there's things that it can't replicate that come from your unique perspective.
Yeah. And I want to ask a question when it comes to writing, because when I write, like I try to include like personality and like flavor into my writing. I try to as much as I can. Sometimes I start a sentence with and, sometimes I start with but, sometimes I have a long sentence, sometimes a short sentence. But can you talk to us about finding your voice in writing? How do you show your personality when you're writing a long piece of content or a short piece of content?
Well, I mean, some of it is dependent on if I'm writing it for a company or a person. I was a ghostwriter for a long time. So I think at one point I ghostwrote 6 different Huffington Post blogs for people all the time in different verticals. But I think hearing your own voice, that's a great question. And I think some of it comes to, when your fingers feel lighter as you're typing and you kind of lose track of time. And then you read it out loud and you realize it has a piece of your personality in it, but it's still conveying what needs to be conveyed about that story or that product or that person. That's the sweet spot. That's like the marathon runners, last mile, where they can see, wow, we made it to the finish line and I made a difference. And
Yeah.
so I think, one of my things that I've always done is I print everything out and then I read it out loud. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's a white paper. It doesn't matter if it's a success story, a blog post. I'll read it out loud, not to just look for my voice, but again, to see if it has that cadence, because I'm getting hired now actually more often than not for the voice and the presence that I have. I can't put my Texas accent into the blog post, but everything else I can.
I like that. Yeah, I feel like I'm just trying to think about my own writing. I feel like personal writing, it's a challenge, but it's a lot easier compared to if you're ghostwriting for a company where you have to put it in their voice.
Yeah.
How do you tackle that challenge compared to when you're ghostwriting for a big company compared to just your own personal stories?
You just find out the most interesting thing about that company, because every company was founded by 1 or 5 people or however many founders, or funded by an equity venture. So there's interesting pieces about it. And then you look at what that company solves for. So what does it solve for the people at large? And I also think about the company is unique because I'm writing not only for that company, but I'm writing for all the employees who work there, because our whole goal is to market something that we're all dependent upon, to keep our jobs. Not that it's not Orwellian or something, but that's the goal at the end of the day. And so I think that's part of it too, is looking at it as a service to your writing. You're using your gift to bring greater awareness to something that will benefit people. And so when you do that, you can still have a piece of your personality in there, especially if you're driven by, money's not a bad thing. So if you're driven by making more money and getting higher up as a writer, that's great. Whatever drives you. But at the end of the day, I think writers are also driven, frankly, by creating good work, whether they have their name on it or not. And so that's kind of how I do it. I think I'm of service to that voice of the company. And I want to make that company interesting and communal and community based, so that people feel like that company really is one that they can trust. That company is even one that if their product wasn't the right fit for the person, that company would tell the person that, and not just try to sell the product. So that's kind of the sweet spot of it.
Yeah, it's just such a different challenge when you are writing for a different one or a different company compared to your own self. And I feel like a lot of young writers, maybe, how would you advise it anyways? Would it be to start writing for yourself and then to get in a ghostwriting gig, or how would you advise someone to get their first writing gig?
To get your first writing gig, one thing I would say is to look where your interests align. So let's say if you want to write about environmental technology, or you want to write about nature and you want to be published in nature magazines. You want to write about the impact of technology against nature. Read the places where you want to write. And what I used to do is I would practice, sometimes in longhand. I know young people won't do this, and that's okay, but I actually used a pen and a paper, and I would copy out in hand what had been written. So I might take an article and copy it out by hand, so I could kind of get a sense physiologically and have my brain, that fine motors working together. And then I would go through and highlight the things that were meaningful in that article. And so that helped me practice writing for a certain publication. I think it's really important to read the publications that you're pitching to. And I think it's really important too, on LinkedIn, you can get some, free writing gigs in exchange. And I think writers should be paid, but if you're just starting out, I think taking an occasional free one that might just be, something that you can put on your portfolio, that's really important. And also let other people read your work. So if if you're the only person reading your work, you're a silo and you're not growing. And so I'm a real believer that we need editors, and we need to not make our work so precious, even in your daytime work. As a writer, if you're like, I'm a playwright at night, I would have people read my plays. If you're writing during the day and you're writing business stuff, I don't ever create something where someone else doesn't look through it and help me see the things I don't see. So you can't be too precious about your writing, because basically what you're doing then is not getting it out there.
Yeah. And I feel like that's viewing it from like a collaborative standpoint of like how you approach writing is you can write it, but you need editors and people to give you feedback on that actual piece of work.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Even if it's the best thing in the world, if you look at it, everyone's been edited. And so you're not creating something new without keeping in mind that someone's going to look at it and edit it. And they may see it in a different way than you see it. So if it's not personal writing, it's company writing, they're going to shift it a little bit. That's okay. It's so hard to get things on paper that I think sometimes writers undervalue their abilities in the market to be able to do that. Because I know a lot of people who will tell me, oh, I always wanted to be a writer. How do you do that? And I actually bought a domain one time. It was, I used to buy domains all the time, but it was assandchair.com. And so when people would ask me that, I would say ass and chair, because that's how you write. That's how you become a writer. You just write. There's no other way around it. It's like asking someone, how do you ride a bicycle? But you never want to get on the bicycle. You just want to keep asking. So, you got to write.
Talk to me about like that learning curve. So let's just say if someone is getting their ass in their chair and starting to write.
Bravo.
What is that? Yeah. First step complete, big check mark to you. But talk to me about that learning curve when it comes to writing. How many hours, how many months, years does it take for you to like really like look back and notice like, oh, like I'm actually a pretty good writer? Do you ever look back and say that? Or what does it look like?
No. And I mean, I don't personally. And I think that's why it's important to have other people read your things, because oftentimes with writing, we don't value our talent as much as we should. And so part of why we don't let other people see our stuff is because we're nervous about it. We think it really sucks. And then, come to find out it doesn't. It's actually pretty good. I've had that happen over and over again. I still have it happen. I wrote a paper just a couple of months ago for my company, which I love my company that I work for right now. And I was so worried that they were just going to think it was terrible. Now, this is a company that hired me because I'm an experienced writer, so I know what I'm doing. They weren't just charmed by my Texas accent on the interviews. And so I was so relieved that, that it was met with such great, just little edits, and this is great. This is exactly what we wanted. So I don't think writers are the best judge of their work.
I feel like that goes with like every creative act, really, because I'm probably around like 200 episodes, actual interviewed across like multiple podcasts. If I went back to my very first episode, I think I would probably, and I have done this before, I have listened and I have cringed so much on just like some of the questions and like how formulated it was. And I feel like the same thing goes for writing as it goes for painting, as it goes from playing the instrument. Like your first piece of work probably is not going to be great, but it comes from those months of experience, getting your ass in the chair and actually writing. That's when you're going to get better and build that confidence.
Exactly. And I would go back. I would challenge you to go back to that first podcast, and I would challenge you to pick 5 things that you did that were absolutely stunning. Number one, you put your ass in the chair and launched a podcast. So that's double points right there. So, that's the other thing, is we have that little self-critical voice in our head. Unfortunately, it's really driven by, our kind of culture too, I think, and it's just been instilled in us, and you have to break out of that. You have to tell it, I've got this handled. I know what I'm doing. Something great is going to come from this. I'm a positive person. I'm not Pollyannish and thinking you just say things and then they happen. But I do think that when things happen, your job is to make reason out of them. And so all the things that you're doing, you can look at it and learn from it.
I love that. And there's a lot to be learned from you. And I am curious on that, let's talk about like the flow of like actually getting into writing and whatnot. Everyone's like trying to find that flow state. You talked about it earlier, like when you're just like light fingers, just typing away. Are there talk to me about your preparation when you're getting ready to write a play or a or a white paper or something.
I do have I have to listen to, usually I listen to, I'll say either Grateful Dead music because I followed the Dead when I was much younger,
I love
or I listen to Patti Smith, or I listen to symphony music.
Love
And
that.
it's just some little thing that kind of tells my brain we're going to start writing. It's on low. And then I think too, there's not a bad thing about having some little traditions that you do. So a lot of times if I've got a white paper that I'm writing, or if I have a play that I'm working on, I'll reward myself along the way. So I will even put into my calendar, hey, you've written 3 days in a row on this. You get to order, one book from Book People. You get to go into Book People and buy this book. So I will incentivize myself. And when I was early on starting as a writer, I would tell people I'm a nonprofit named Nettie, and I'm supporting a board named my kids. And, this is what I do for a living. And so I always kept myself incentivized in different ways. And then I also think sometimes writing, going somewhere to a coffee shop and writing, even if you have your headphones on, because we've all kind of become so remote, that it helps you see other people and what they're doing, whether they're writing or not, they're all together. And I think there's some synergy and energy that happens when you allow yourself to get out of a place where you could get what they term writer's block. I think you can outsmart writer's block by incentivizing yourself, or that's how it's worked for me.
Interesting. Lots to unpack there. One, I also love Book People. So if you're in Austin, Texas, you know Book People. If you're in Austin, Texas,
shout out to Book People.
Yes, shout out to Book People is right. But I love the idea of incentivizing yourself for 3 consecutive days of writing. But you could also, I'm sure you do this as well. If you write for an hour straight, you can take a 15-minute walk. Kind of like those micro incentives. That's an idea that I really, really like.
That's a great idea. I had not thought of that. I love that idea because then you're getting outside of where you're working. That's a really good idea.
Yeah. And that kind of, and that coffee shop idea that you have, I love, because I work remotely as well. I sit in this desk 8, 9, 10 hours a day. So yeah, it's going to a coffee shop, I feel like, is another great way to break that writer's block that you do have. Are there any other tips that you have for writer's block?
Okay. This is an odd one, but it has always worked for me.
I love it.
Handwrite something, anything from one of your favorite books. Just start your handwriting.
Interesting.
And if you just cannot do that, then what I would say is just start typing on a blank sheet of paper. Don't even think about the idea. Just tell your brain, because sometimes your brain needs to know we're going to start writing. I will also say that probably in the last 5 years, I do a 3-minute, I have a little 8 timer, and I'm just quiet for 3 minutes before I start a big project. And it's just to kind of, again, tell my mind, we're going to start working on something big. I carry, my phone has, it used to be a recorder, but now my phone has a little app where you can record yourself. While you're driving. And so, keep your hands on the steering wheel, young people, but you can put your app on, and sometimes I'll write talking. If I'm just totally blocked, I'll just start talking what I'm going to write. And that helps for whatever reason. And then I just come home and listen to it, and I start transcribing it. And whether it's good or not, I'm still telling my brain, there's no way you're going to get around this. It's kind of like a chess game where, you have to give up some pawns, but you're still going to make it across the board because you got to get the writing done. So it's kind of out strategizing yourself too.
Yeah. I like the driving one because you remind me of my dad. My dad, he says his best idea comes when he's just driving. So
yeah,
and then just talking out loud as well, that helps, I believe, everyone.
Yeah, I think doing something like I used to wash dishes a lot and on purpose, because there's something about just having your hands doing something else. Now I garden a lot when I'm stuck or I can't think of something. Sometimes when I'm gardening, I'll hear And I'm a terrible gardener. I just garden succulents, which isn't even really called gardening because you don't have to hardly water them at all. But I'll go out and talk to them and stuff. But, sometimes doing that, it's like my brain will just start thinking of other things, especially if I'm working on a play. I'll hear voices of the people that I'm trying to write about.
That's so
Not
cool.
in a woo-woo way, but just like, oh, they're wanting this. This is what they're wanting me to talk about.
Yeah, I feel like that's such a great way to bring like a play to life. I've never written a play or even tried to, but I feel like that's a great way to write a play. But we are kind of winding down on time here, and I want to go back to one of the very first things you said is that you have found a lot of jobs through like LinkedIn. Can you share with us like one or two hacks for a young person, young in their career that's looking for their next job? What can they do on LinkedIn to like find their next gig?
Yeah. Okay. So my whole career has been pitch and swerve as a writer, including taking like 8 years off to be interfaith hospice chaplain. And then I came back to LinkedIn and still was able to find jobs. So my tips are, don't look at all those sales guys or sales men and women telling you these are the things you've got to do on your LinkedIn. You've got to post every day. What I say is spend 30 minutes a week, 2 times a week, read what other people are posting, and post your own good pieces of writing. So if you have something you're like, hey, I just thought about this in the news, and you post it across your LinkedIn, that's going to be samples of your work. And then join at least 2 groups that are local to your city. And you can do that. There's like LinkedIn, Austin, Texas. There's LinkedIn, San Francisco. When I was a journalist for the tech industry, I joined a bunch of those different groups. And that's really good too. And also change your vanity URL. Everyone go look it up. You can personalize your URL, and you can even put writer at the end of your name, so that when you send your LinkedIn out to people, it says writer in your name. And you can always put that at the bottom of your emails. You always want to say, connect with me on LinkedIn, because if you do that, people are a little bit like sheeple and they'll follow the command to do something. So if you say, connect with me on LinkedIn at the bottom of your email, you're going to start making connections.
And everyone, I want to hammer the point here that Nettie is leading by action, because I know in her emails, we have exchanged emails, she actually has this at the bottom of hers. So,
and he's done it.
Yeah. And I have gone to your LinkedIn from your email signature, which is really funny. So that just speaks to the power of the advice today. So Nettie, very last question for you. Thank you for that. Where can people connect with you, learn a little bit more about you? Thank you so much for being here today.
It went by too fast. I really enjoyed it. And I just want to champion everybody out there. I think, I have 2 young people in their early 20s, and I think you guys are going to change the world. I think you're just incredible. And I'm grateful that you're in the world. Connect with me on LinkedIn if you send me a connection. And I tell you what, if anybody that connects with me on LinkedIn wants a 15-minute little Zoom thing on how to use LinkedIn as a writer, if they connect with me and say they heard me through this, I'm happy to do that. And then for free, I won't be selling you a follow-up Roomba or something. And then also, that's at Nettie Reynolds. That's my full name, Nettie Reynolds. And then also follow my pug. Her name is Olive. She's Olive the Wonder Pug on Instagram. She's a micro pug influencer, so she does need more followers. And so I would encourage you to do that. And then finally, keep writing. Don't give up. And don't use your day job of business writing as your only form of writing. So read and write. If you have aspirations to write other things, write those. Don't give up one for the other.
I love that, Nettie. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Super appreciated you.
You're welcome. I'll meet you in Austin. I'll treat you to coffee.
Yeah, at the Book People Cafe.
That sounds good. Let's do it.